And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. One of my favorite tweets of the last couple of days from Donald Trump. He tweeted out, no way we lost the election. Again, you got to throw the temper tantrum in public. You got to do it out in front. So, look, there are people who are taking great joy, and I'm one of those people taking great joy in the fact that he doesn't believe it's possible that he lost. He did, but he had a video of a large crowd. And I've heard this from Trump supporters. He had bigger crowds. And you go, yeah, and sadly he had bigger crowds because there were so many people who, in the middle of a global pandemic, weren't smart enough to stay the hell home. That doesn't mean that there weren't an equal number of people ready to vote against him and for Joe Biden. And this was one of the defenses that we've seen from the Republicans. Well, his crowds were so much bigger. Like that's, you get 15,000 people in a room. That's the whole state. Now, the reality is Pennsylvania has certified Joe Biden as the winner. Wisconsin, even after Donald Trump spent a couple $1 million to recount the vote and make sure that Joe Biden got even more votes, Wisconsin certified the election. Michigan, same thing, certified the election, even with all the crying and the shenanigans. Georgia did absolutely the same thing, certified the election for Biden. Arizona, Nevada as well. It's over. There's no scenario in which Donald Trump grabs victory out of the jaws of defeat. He lost. And this is one of those moments where you go, he lost. Move on. Move the country forward. Be a unifier. If you want to run in 2024, that's your business. If the day of, 5 minutes after Joe Biden takes the oath of office, you want to go, and I'm running again, that's your right to do. But in this moment, you lost. And, the thing that got me is while we were off on our Thanksgiving break, the day before Thanksgiving, in my state of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania State Senate, the majority leader, Kim Ward, newly in place, along with Senator Mastriano, who is going to run for governor in 2022, Senator Argel, and a number of other of the Republican governors who have always been to the right of sanity. They were out there and holding their little kangaroo court hearing. Now, the important thing to understand about the hearing that they held, most hearings that I've ever gone to or been a part of, they've been under oath. So when you go and you sit down and you go to testify, you swear that you're going to tell the whole truth, the whole truth, nothing but so help me goodness. You're going to do that. And not just, so help me God, but under the guise that if you lie, it's perjury. If you make stuff up, it's perjury. Well, they didn't do any of that for this kangaroo hearing. And I gotta wonder why. Because I watched the entire hearing, all 3 painful hours. And because look, I want to know if there's something wrong with our elections. I want open, fair elections. I want what comes out of that ballot box to be pure. The only way that we can have this experiment of self-rule, of governance by we the people, is to have the consent of the governed, us, and to have the results of those elections fair, accurate, and open to everyone. And you could argue that none of that is the reality, and we can have that discussion. But given the rules that are in place now, given the way that things are right now, this was, as Mr. Krebs, the cybersecurity guy said, probably the most secure election in the history of this country. Do I have massive problems with the voting machines? You bet I do. And while during the hearing they went on and on and on about how Dominion voting machines were rigged and how Hugo Chavez was behind the rigging of these voting machines, 12 of the 14 counties in Pennsylvania that used them actually went to Trump. And neither Pittsburgh or Philadelphia use these machines. So they're arguing that there's all this widespread cheating and Philadelphia is where it's all at. But the machines that they claim rigged the election weren't even there. I know it's the USBs now. And they had people come out of I saw this or I saw that. And none of it was under oath. And most of it was anecdotal. And, this is one of those weird moments where we're in this weird time. And I think the Secretary of State of Georgia probably said it best. His name is Brad Raffensperger. He said that there are those who are exploiting the emotions of many Trump supporters with fantastic claims, half-truths, and misinformation. And frankly, they are misleading the president as well, apparently. Because all of this stuff Trump was out there tweeting. They had hundreds of people here in Pennsylvania show up to Gettysburg, the hallowed ground of Gettysburg, crammed hundreds of people into a hotel ballroom to hear this dog and pony show. Rudy Giuliani came in. He brought Attorney Ellis. He brought all kinds of he had all kinds of acts, and they ran through their paces. They got all riled up in the panties. They got all angry. And the people at the front of the room, the politicians who were there, everyone virtually maskless, they were egging them on. Now, I got to argue that, and this is my belief, that the people at the front of the room, the senators at the front of the room, knew better. They know that there's no way that they're going to be able to, throw out millions of votes and disenfranchise half of the state. They know that they're never going to be able to overturn the election because there's nothing that they can point to that would justify that. What they're there for is they know this is a great fundraising opportunity. This is a great list building opportunity. This is politics at its greatest. We're going to not let a good crisis go to waste for our own political gain. So they got all these people all riled up and screaming, and Rudy Giuliani even asked point blank, will you set aside this election? And he's like, whoa, no. We're going to let the courts work this out. We're just here to let you go crazy enough to get us some publicity, get our name in the newspaper, and get our supporters to think that we're actually doing something when all we're actually doing is raising money off of it and list building off of the faithful. And again, we know this and we've seen it played out so many times. But here we are in the middle of this global pandemic. And the reason I bring this up is they crammed all these people into a room. All of them maskless, all of them basically foaming at the mouth. And we find out a couple hours later that Senator Mastriano, I always say his name wrong, but Senator Mastriano, he showed up at the White House with his son and a friend of his son. 4 hours after the big powwow in Gettysburg, he's at the White House. Now that's not so groundbreaking or earth-shattering. We know Trump wants to manipulate who he can to do his dirty work, and Mastriano is a guy that clearly wanting and willing to be put in that position because he wants to run for governor, and he's going to need the rabid base that Donald Trump has to get there. But lo and behold, he's tested positive for COVID, where just hours before he was in this room of basically rabid supporters, breathing the same air, breathing on the senators next to him on both sides. He basically created a super spreader event for his own political gain. There was never going to be a moment where they go, oh my gosh, we're so shocked by what we hear, we're going to move and set aside millions of votes. It's never going to happen. And to highlight that, there's a state representative, Russ Diamond, who I affectionately call Ding Dong. Today, he has introduced a piece of legislation, House Resolution 1094, that would formally dispute the 2020 election results. Now, it's going to need 102 people to pass. It has 21 sponsors at this moment. It would mean every Republican would have to basically vote for it. That ain't going to happen. Oh, and did I mention there isn't another session scheduled until next year? So this is another one of those naked attempts at fundraising and list building. And for Diamond to get someone to mention his name so that he looks like he's actually doing something. When all he's doing is doing, hey, look at me. Look how wonderful I am. Give me money and support my next campaign. He is everything that's wrong with politics in this country. Now, if you could point to something, if you could point to this is what it was, this is where the fraud was, this is where the evidence was, if you would have done it under oath, if you would have brought it into a court of law in Pennsylvania, which they have not done, and every time they've gone into the court of law in Pennsylvania, Trump appointed judge, Obama appointed judge, Clinton appointed judge, George W. Bush appointed judge, they've tossed it out because it's crap. It's fantasy, it's wishful thinking, but in the process, what they have done is they've created an environment of tearing us apart even more. And to tell you just how crazy things have gotten, one of Trump's campaign lawyers, a guy who was a former U.S. attorney, a guy named Joe DiGiovanna, DiGenova is his name. He actually said that Chris Krebs, the guy Trump fired, the cybersecurity expert that Trump fired, should be executed for not supporting Donald Trump. For not coming out and saying, no, it's all fraud, it's all bad. He should be executed. This is what fascists do. This scares me more than anything because sadly there are people going, that's what we should be doing. Show them. At a moment where we are in a global pandemic. And when the kangaroo hearing was happening, I was asking quite frankly, this super spreader event, how many people are going to get sick? How many people are going to die? And I was calling on our Secretary of Health, Dr. Levine, we need to do some contact tracing. We need to know who's in this room, where they're taking this, because the virus is spreading in our state. My kids' schools are now closed because it is spreading. All because these people wanted to show up. I don't need no stinking masks. A listener sent me a tweet from someone named Meg Tomorrow. And it just grabbed me. This Meg Tomorrow writes, I'm tired of explaining to people the mess we are in at hospitals in Pittsburgh. I'm on the front lines, she writes. I'm your family or your friend or your acquaintance or your fellow Pittsburgh resident. I have no incentive to exaggerate anything, yet people still doubt me. It's sad half the country doesn't appreciate what those of us in healthcare are enduring right now. I often wonder why I'm even continuing to try and explain. I can feel like a smack in the face. I am met with, but is it really that bad? Too many restrictions. But how many of those COVID patients actually need to be there? If I get COVID and die, then I die. But you only think it's bad because it's what you see every day. It has never been this bad, she says. We're opening extra units to accommodate all the COVID positive patients. We have switched to disaster charting. We're converting more and more rooms to negative pressure, higher and higher nurse to patient ratios, and working 50 to 60 hours a week plus. Restrictions have always been about trying not to overwhelm the hospitals so patients with COVID and with regular health concerns can have the ability to get treatment. She says, well, guess what? We're overwhelmed now. And still, many, many Americans don't give a single, the S word follows. The morgue is full. What on earth is it going to take for you people to believe us? And I look at that room of Trump supporters, rabid Trump supporters. And you read this and you go, it was always about not overwhelming our healthcare system. It wasn't about, is it survivable for the majority of us? It was about that. It was about not destroying and making it worse what systems we have in place. In fact, there was another thread that caught my attention of a doctor who said, look, and this is the amazing part of the people, the frontline heroes that get up every day and go to these hospitals and to these clinics to take care of people. In came a guy who was a Nazi. He had a big old swastika on his chest, all kinds of Nazi, everything, all the SS tattoos, you name it, he was covered in it. And it's an older guy, stocky guy, your basic white supremacist, your basic flag carrying, with the guy screaming at the Capitol. And he's sick and he's dying. And as this doctor points out, there's a Jewish doctor, there's a black nurse, there's an Asian respiratory therapist, and they are there doing their damn well best to save someone who hates them. And it speaks volumes about them, because at one moment he says, I don't want to die, save me. And they said, we're doing what we can, we're doing our best. Where you can easily picture this person a month ago being one of those, I don't give a rat's behind. I don't care about your stinking this or that. These are the people who are our heroes. These are the people we should be listening to. These are the people who we should be pushing for. Not the Rudy Giulianis and the kangaroo courts and the Mastrianos and all of the ding-dong diamonds of the world, who are clearly in this for themselves. This is very much about me, 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 me. And you have all these wonderful people who are standing up and saying, look, we've got to do some simple stuff to protect all of us. And the weird thing is in all of these nurses threads, and I try and read as many of the threads that not doctors and nurses put out from the front lines. In all of them, they're always talking about the patients. Rarely do you hear them talk about themselves. This is why when the Biden administration comes into office, one of the first things we have to do immediately is move forward on making sure that these people get the protections that they need, get the equipment that they need, and get well, the dignity that they deserve. And maybe with a change in leadership, maybe some of the insanity goes away, maybe some of the thought comes back, and maybe we get through this. Maybe. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break, right back after this. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
American than workers standing up, and the union gives them voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1930. That was the day the world lost the miner's angel, Mother Jones. She had crossed the country many times over, been involved in practically every strike that built the labor movement, stood with miners and steelworkers and mill children everywhere. Mother Jones had asked to be buried with the Verdun miners killed in the massacre of 1898 at Union Miners Cemetery in Mount Olive, Illinois. Dozens of labor leaders, including AFL President William Green, attended her funeral in Maryland, where she had been living. Then AFL representatives, several Illinois miners, and others boarded the Baltimore and Ohio train to accompany her body to Mount Olive. Historian David Featherling describes the scene as her body arrived. A band played Nearer My God to Thee as onlookers bowed their heads and wept. Survivors of the Verdun riot bore the casket to the Odd Fellows Hall, where it lay in state. The town of 3,500, with its strong and violent heritage, was thronged by thousands of coal diggers. At least 15,000 turned out for the funeral. Broadcast on WCFL, the Chicago Federation of Labor's radio station, the labor priest, Reverend John McGuire, gave the memorial address and officiated at the funeral in Mount Olive's Roman Catholic Church of the Ascension. He asked what weapons she had to fight the fight against oppression of working men. Only the great and burning conviction that oppression must end. Only an eloquent and flaming tongue that won men to her cause. Only a mother's heart torn by the suffering of the poor. Only a towering courage that made her carry on in the face of insuperable odds. Only a consuming love for the poor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I got to tell you, I'm coming back to that Trump attorney, Di Giovanna, or Genova, Di Genova, or 'cause I'm just so struck by the fact that this guy who was a former U.S. attorney would come out and say that since Chris Krebs, the former cybersecurity chief, didn't agree with Trump and didn't agree with Rudy Giuliani and all of the fanciful claims of all this fraud and abuse, that he should be executed. Let that sink in for a minute. In this country, you've got somebody who is a phone call from the president, who's working for the president, saying we should be executing people who don't agree with him. It's crazy. Here to share some thoughts on, the super spreader event that was the Pennsylvania Senate's big kangaroo hearing with Rudy Giuliani, and maybe to address some of the claims that Giuliani threw out. I've asked Khalif Ali to come talk with us. Khalif is the executive director of Common Cause PA. Khalif, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick. Appreciate it.
So let's start right with the execution. Should we be executing people who don't agree with the president?
First of all, in a democracy, I think the highest order of any civilization is civility itself. So there shouldn't be any talk of it.
Yeah, I mean, but the highest form of citizenship is dissent. And to say that in this country, someone we disagree with should be executed. That's wow. I'm still stuck on that. But I brought you on to talk about the big kangaroo hearing. Rudy Giuliani brought the road show, the Trump tantrum show, to Pennsylvania. They rolled out their allegations of all this widespread fraud, this conspiracy. And as I was saying on Wednesday, evidently Joe Biden learned coding while we were in quarantine. Did you take anything away from that hearing where you would go, yeah, maybe there was something that went on? Was there anything?
I didn't see anything. We can't put it on the judges. Those were all conservative judges, Republican appointed judges. Even the judge that wrote the decision was a Trump appointee. And so I didn't see any merit to any of the arguments. Most of them were false and unsubstantiated claims. So no, I didn't see anything that you could truly hang your hat on and say that this is something that we should be concerned about.
All right, let's go with the first thing, the Dominion voting system. Evidently, Hugo Chavez has come back from the grave to rig the election for Joe Biden. Evidently, Joe's got a direct line to wherever Hugo is, and Hugo came back from the dead to deal with the Dominion voting systems. What we know, and maybe you can clarify for us, is of the 14 counties in Pennsylvania that used the Dominion system, Trump won 12 of them. And I don't believe any were in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. Is that accurate?
That is absolutely 100% accurate, yes.
So that was kind of a linchpin of their argument, wasn't it?
It was. There was no merit in that as well. You just laid out the facts of the case. And if as you look at the case, it seems that the judges are pretty much exasperated by the argument and by the case itself. And again, these are Republican appointed judges who appear to be very exasperated in the argument.
Yeah. Now, the other claim that they made, and again, for me, as I was watching this hearing, Philadelphia kept coming up time and time and time again. Philadelphia was quite often.
Right.
For me, that is one of these moments where you go, this is kind of dog whistle politic, isn't it? I mean, this is kind of for the rest of the state going, hey, Philadelphia is, a bunch of these criminals. Did you take that as I did?
It's tough to look at it in a way that isn't motivated by race in some cases, and by party in other cases. So yeah, I mean, I took a lot away from that. I think it was an unfair characterization of Philadelphia and an unfair targeting of Philadelphia. And I think there's a number of reasons that we can look at that accounted for that.
So when you look at this, and again, it's one of these moments where you, as I've been saying for a while, the scary part of their whole kangaroo court argument was that there were so many little things that they threw out, so many people who came who bared their soul, and they truly believed that they witnessed something. And these USB sticks are something that they talked about extensively. In fact, they had a guy who's gotten millions of hits because he's a cybersecurity expert and he understands fraud. And he was talking about they were using these USB things, and he never really went into how the fraud happened. It's just that they were using them. Some had been missing. So for him, those two things seem to be the fraud. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so it's a case of just not being able to accept the facts of the situation. It was a resounding loss for the Trump campaign. Not only did the Third Circuit reject that campaign's argument, but the panel found that the proposed Second Amendment complaint was fatally flawed because it raised issues of state law that have already been litigated by the Trump campaign in state and federal court, and fails to raise any claims that would necessitate the relief that Trump campaign is requesting. So yeah,
it's over. It's dead.
It's
It's been certified. Trump is lost. But here's the thing. One of my least favorite representatives, somebody I affectionately call Ding Dong, he has come forth with a resolution to set aside the election. It's already been certified. They've already, canceled all sessions. The next session is not till the next year when they seat the new representatives. But he has come out and now he wants to set aside, the election. He has his resolution. 23 other people signed on to it. Do you see that going anywhere?
No. I think these are last-ditch efforts to try to argue, but let me just say this: I think we're establishing a very dangerous precedent when it comes to our democratic processes. not that they're perfect, but I don't think that they need to. The primary challenge is based on the fact that there was a loss, and that there was a loss that was unsatisfactory to the majority in here in Pennsylvania.
No, absolutely, I agree with you on that. And where my problem, the reason I'm laying all this out is I want to get to the point to where. There are going to be some irregularities. There always are. There are little things that happen along the way. They happen every election cycle. But what the Trump people wanted to do is take these irregularities and bring them all together and make them some grand conspiracy that Joe Biden had and the Biden clan had put together to steal the election from Donald Trump. And my answer to that has been consistent. If Joe Biden did learn coding during quarantine, I want to know how he did it so I can learn. And
Right.
two, if he really figured this out, why didn't he get himself a Senate that we could actually get some things done?
Exactly. I agree. I mean, but the fact is that election security experts have found that the 2020 elections were safe and secure, and that the results were accurate. Pennsylvania had record turnout, including nearly 3 million voters who voted by mail as a result of that bipartisan Act 77. And so I just think this is a little bit of a sour grapes here.
Do you find
A lot of sour grapes.
Do you find it interesting that Senator Mastriano, who I believe is going to run for governor in 2022, and this was really his coming out party, even though he did get COVID out of it, it was his coming out party. Because he got to take center stage and he got to say how wonderful he was and how his military experiences gives him leadership and how he can quote the Bible. He can do all those things while still getting COVID, having a super spreader event.
Yep.
I look at this and say he actually voted for the thing you're talking about. He actually voted to allow the mail-in ballot to happen. And this is where the hypocrisy and the idiocy for me just kind of breaks down. And I struggle with people like Senator Mastriano, who was okay with this to vote for it, but now that it's politically advantageous, we could do some fundraising and some list building off of this.
Right. I think that's exactly right. Had the results been different or been in favor of President Trump, this wouldn't even be a conversation. They would be saluting the fact that Act 77 did exactly as it was supposed to do, which is give access to voters and broaden the access and allow people to be a little bit more confident about voting during these times.
Yeah. Now, I'll be honest with you. I actually liked the way I voted this time. I'm hoping we go forward and we open up the access to people voting. To me, this is a good step. Look, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We tried something a little new. I would like to see it expanded. I would like
Yeah.
because I'm a person who believes I don't care who wins or loses. I want an open and fair election. I want the results that come out of that box to be accurate. For me, the
Absolutely.
idea that you put out, like I voted, I got the first time I voted like this. I requested a mail-in ballot. They sent it to me. I filled it out. I put it back in the secret envelope, and then I put it back in the travel envelope, and I dropped it in the box. Next day,
Yep.
they sent me an email and said, "Rick, we got your ballot." I love that.
Um, the fact is voting by mail. It's not a new concept. This is not rocket scientists or some a new discovery. In fact, it's been tried and tested in states across the country. In the 2018 midterm elections, 27% of all voters cast their ballot by mail. There are several states that use vote by mail extensively: Colorado, Oregon, Washington, Utah, and your state, California. Not all traditionally blue states either. This is not anything uncommon. This is very common and very effective in many cases.
Yeah, I mean, again, I go back to this, and I hope Pennsylvania continues to open up mail-in ballot because I was never able to do this before because you had to go down and you had to say why you're going to be out of town. It was an arduous process.
Right.
Open it up, give me more opportunities, and also my pet peeve. I don't believe in the machines. When the Republicans came out and said, Dominion was flipping votes, because this is what Democrats had been saying in the past. I said, I want to hear what your argument is because I don't want that to happen. I don't like the machines. I'm a big fan of hand marked paper ballots that can be counted again and again and again and again. And if Donald Trump wants to spend more money counting votes here in Pennsylvania, I hope he does that.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think that's something that we'll definitely be looking into as an organization is I think um, the pandemic actually and the changes that occurred during the pandemic actually opened our eyes in terms of what are the possibilities for people to be able to um, actively participate in these elections and also sort of reinstilling confidence in democracy. And I think Act 77 is exactly the way to do that, in part. So yeah, it's definitely something that we're going to be looking at keeping in place.
Do you see any validity in the argument that the poll watchers had that they couldn't see when they were opening all the ballots in Philadelphia? They couldn't see to verify them. Now, look, we are in the middle of a global pandemic. You don't want, if you're somebody opening the envelopes, you clearly don't want someone breathing down your neck. But do you think it was sufficient the way that they did it? And look, I understand this is a system that they'd never had before. And going forward, I'm sure there's a better way that we can do it. Did you see a problem with how they did it?
I don't necessarily see a problem, keeping in mind, the standard for the pandemic and social distancing and all the things that are necessary to keep everyone safe. I don't think there's a problem with that. I don't think it will be exactly the same, after the pandemic. And I think there was a lot to be learned, but I can't see anything illegal occurring. I didn't see anything or hear of anything illegal occurring in Philadelphia.
Because there were a lot of stories out there, and I'm sure you've seen a bunch of them. I mean, some of my favorite are the guy at the post office who said his supervisor told everybody backdate the every mail, which you go, I don't know how you do that with the machines, but okay, good luck.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't. Some of those stories, yeah, I can't give any credence to, and I don't know how those even became a part of the narrative. you know.
No, I mean, and this is the sad part. I mean, we have a president who clearly believes he's entitled to win. In fact, just today he tweeted out that there's no way he lost the election because he had bigger crowds at his rallies, which is really just childish and nonsensical. But Rudy Giuliani, who was at one point an esteemed lawyer, actually made the argument that because on Tuesday night Donald Trump had a bigger lead, he should have won.
Right. Again, I'm just very, we all at Common Cause are very concerned about the president. These ongoing attacks on election results, just blatant attempts to undermine the democratic process. And it's really a slap in the face to election officials and voters who worked tirelessly to overcome the barriers of this pandemic and a new voting process in Pennsylvania. It's,
Yeah,
it's
if you had to tweak things, what would you do better next time? Because clearly nothing's ever perfect. What would we have done differently, in hindsight?
um, more training for poll workers, or they're wasn't always adequate training for every poll worker in the state. You know, we were pressed because we didn't have enough, and then when we were able to fill that gap, I think the training was not quite what it should be, and that's something that we're definitely going to look into.
No, it's something that, the more we talk about these elections and the more important I think they are, the more hopefully we draw people in. And this amazingly was a huge turnout year. And I'm hoping that, the kind of enthusiasm we saw carries over into the midterms and into the next elections, and that we're able to replicate this in a way that is inclusive for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we definitely want to also dig into back to that question. It's like pre-registration for 16, 17-year-olds, automatic voter registration. These are things I think that are essential to continue to build upon the work that's already been done, especially with Act 77.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and that's a great idea. I like the automatic voter registration. Look, when I was 18, I had to sign up for selective service. I have no idea why they didn't hand me a voter registration form right at that very point.
Absolutely. So there's a lot to build upon based on what we saw, what we've learned, and what we know here in Pennsylvania. And we plan to continue to build upon that work.
And if people want to get involved in what you guys are doing, what would they do?
They can go to commoncause.org, and you want to look at specifically the state of Pennsylvania. There's a map, and you can go to the map, click on Pennsylvania, and it'll take you directly to our site.
Good stuff. You guys do great work. I love the work that you guys do, Khalif. I appreciate you taking some time for us, and please come back and talk to us again anytime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick.
Fantastic stuff, Khalif Ali. He is the executive director there at Common Cause PA. And look, like I said, I want to see open and fair elections. I want to see people exercising their right to the franchise, casting their ballot, and I want it to be counted. It's just that simple. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Send me your conspiracies, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1854. That was the day that Mary McDowell, known as the Angel of the Chicago Stockyards, was born. Mary's father brought the family to Chicago from Cincinnati after the Civil War. Her family was friends with U.S. President Rutherford B. Hayes, and as a young woman, she spent a month in the White House as a guest. Mary received her college degree and worked as a teacher for a wealthy family in New York. But living and working among the wealthy was not to be the course of her life. She returned to Chicago and became a kindergarten teacher at the famed Hull House. She then became the head of the University of Chicago Settlement House in the back of the yards. The Settlement House served the diverse neighborhoods around the Chicago stockyards. The community center included a library, play lots, gymnasiums, and classrooms. Mary and her settlement house supported the rights of workers to form unions and to have safe working conditions. In 1903, Mary became the head of the Illinois chapter of the National Women's Trade Union League. The Pittsburgh Press reported on an incident that captured the spirit of Mary McDowell. The city of Chicago had a practice of using garbage to fill holes in the streets surrounding the stockyards. Mary showed up at the mayor's office with a group of women from the neighborhood and demanded, quote, "All right, we want the rest of it dumped on Lakeshore Drive. If it's good enough for the stockyards, it's good enough for the drive too." As a result, the city stopped using garbage to repair the streets. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So during our Thanksgiving break, I spent the mass of the time on a picket line in just south of where I live. As you had 55 workers who went on strike, and I've talked about this on the show before. Basically they're a microcosm of this country. Half of them were men, half of them were women, minorities. You had young, old. You had basically a cross section of every group you can find in these 55 people. Half of them voted for Donald Trump, half of them voted for Joe Biden. It was really just this incredible kind of almost a social experiment. But these 55 workers, they said, no, we're not going to take the crappy wages that you're offering. We're not going to see massive increases in the cost of our health care. We're not going to allow you to do all of the things that you want to do to us on the work floor. And we're going to stand up and say no. And we're going to go on strike over it. And this has been one of those things for them that's been building for a long time. And over the next 25 days, these people, they manned the picket line. They negotiated, they demanded to be treated fairly, and they won. And for me, this was one of those moments where everything else aside, all of our differences aside, all of the ways that we slice and dice ourselves into categories and subcategories, that was for me the righteous fight. It's the right fight. It's not about what specialized group that you've been lumped into. It's about fighting the fight of the extraordinarily wealthy and the rest of us. The company that they work for is a global multi-billion-dollar company. They're part of another huge global entity. They make billions of dollars a year, and yet they wanted to continue to shift the cost of healthcare onto the backs of the workers. In fact, for half of the workforce, in the fourth and fifth year of the contract, they would actually be making less money. They'd be working for less money than they are now because their healthcare costs would have gone up so high. And this was, again, another example of solidarity, because the bottom half of the group did pretty well. They would have done okay. They'd have done pretty well because of the original sin of the company demanding a two-tiered wage system back in the 90s. This was one of those moments where you saw people who got it. They got the concept of solidarity. They got the idea that they have some power when they unite. And who they voted for and what their faith was, or what they thought of gay marriage or abortion or any of those things didn't matter. That was what the fight was, and it was the righteous fight against global capital and against greed. And for me, that's one of those things that, I think we have to, as a country, begin to organize around the idea that we can be united. There are issues that we overwhelmingly agree on. I talk about the gun control issue. Everybody in this country agrees with gun control. Everybody. It's not a matter of if we should have gun control. It's simply a matter of where you draw the line. I've yet to find anyone who believes that one of our billionaires who can afford a stealth bomber with a nuclear warhead should be allowed to have one. Because chances are they might drop it on those striking workers. So there are things that we absolutely fundamentally agree on, healthcare being one of them. And this is, for me, one of these moments for the new year where my goal is going to find those areas where we can agree. Find those areas where we can move forward on, so that we can actually get some things done. The scary thing to me, and the thing that's just infuriating, is that the last 4 years, the working class of this country has again lost out. There's all this talk of, your 401ks are doing great, the economy's doing great. But for the average working class person, The average ham and egger, the average person who punches a clock and at the end of the week gets a check that doesn't go far enough to cover what they need, their lives haven't gotten better. This administration did nothing for them. Donald Trump ran around the country and saying he was going to bring back the 1950s. He was going to bring back coal, and he was going to bring back all the auto jobs. We were going to bring manufacturing back, and it was going to be great. When the reality is most people, what they want from that era is they want those union jobs back. They want those union jobs with good wages. They want those union jobs with good health care benefits and good retirement security. They want those good union jobs that gave them a voice in the workplace, that kept them safe, that respected seniority and didn't throw them to the street at every turn. And for me, the going forward part of the new year is I want Joe Biden to do what I wish for every president. Every president of my conscious lifetime, or at least the last 15 years of doing this show, has been, I want them to be the person who pursues policies that will return reward to work. That if you work hard, you play by the rules, you do get ahead. That you can support your family, that you can save for retirement, that you can take a break every once in a while, a vacation, a day off. That you don't live to work, that you can actually work to live. There are policies Joe Biden can move forward on immediately. There are things that he can do to make things better. But ultimately, the big stuff is going to take a Congress willing to move forward on it. And that's going to come back to Georgia. If Georgia, gives the Democrats the 2 Senate seats there is a chance that some legislation will move this country forward. But if we remain this divided, if we remain so divided that nothing can get done, the multinational corporations, they're the ones who win in this. The status quo for them is great. The fact that we're not going to tax them, the fact that we're not going to regulate them, the fact that we're not going to hold them accountable, the fact that we're not going to demand that companies pay decent wages, hours, and conditions to their workforce, and that in order for some of them to do it, they have to risk their livelihoods, they have to risk their savings, they have to risk their families by going out on strike. Now understand, in the private sector, and this is hard to hear, labor represents 6% of the private sector workforce. 6%. It's almost to the point where it was when it was illegal to be a union member. It's almost at the point where I remember a guy, Dick Boyd was his name. He was the head of the York Labor Council. He was like 100 years old last time I saw him. He said when he was a little kid, his father used to take him to the union meetings that they would hold at midnight under the railroad bridge so no one could see them. And he was sworn to secrecy, couldn't tell his mother, because if his mother found out, she'd lose her ever-loving flippin' mind, because they could be blackballed. And what that meant is they would starve, or they would have to move to another place. We've gotten to a moment where it's almost impossible to organize. It's almost impossible to do what these 55 courageous workers did. And that is stand up in the face of overwhelming odds and stare them down and say, we will stay here one day longer. We demand to be treated fairly. And for me, the message out of this is that it is possible. That through unity, through solidarity, putting down our divides, putting aside our differences, and fighting the righteous, the good fight, is the way forward. Look, we've been easily sliced and diced. We've been easily pitted against one another. And the wealth class is masterful at it. As the railroad magnate Jay Gould once said, I can easily pay half the working class to murder the other half. We're not murdering people anymore. They're not even sending people out with clubs to beat striking workers anymore. We're just starving them. And if you've been paying attention to the news, the food lines, miles long, people in their cars. And if you look at those cars, those are cars that have never been on a food line before. You've got people who are filing for unemployment who have never had to do that before. And what we have is we have a Congress that, led by Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate, are unwilling to do anything. And it's about the politics. It's all about, and I hate to think it's this simple, but it comes back to fundraising and list building. It comes back to them riling up their base so that they can cash in, so that it's about the money. And I hate to be that cynical, but it's where we are in this country. And until we do something about our elections and how they're conducted and how we spend on them, and we undo things like Citizens United, it's going to continue to be more of the same. And we're going to continue to get people like Donald Trump, who can raise unimaginable amounts of money. It should be about more. It should be about the policy. It should be about what they are going to do and how they are going to lead us forward, and not what divides us. For too long, we've given into this, and I'm hoping at some point that we wake up from it. I've been really frustrated because we're moving into this moment where the recovery isn't happening. Industries are probably going to be wiped out. We see, big, the big chains taking over the little guy, and using government money to do it, which is just disgraceful. And we haven't hit the point yet where people are going to start losing their homes. They're getting there. There are going to be foreclosures. There are going to be evictions. There are going to be all of these horrible things coming because we still haven't gotten people money. And I know there are people saying, but Rick, it'll be all right. When Joe Biden gets into office, we'll get something done. Are you sure about that? With Mitch McConnell in the Senate, if Democrats don't win both seats in Georgia, do you really think Mitch McConnell, who has done nothing since the last stimulus passed months ago and has said they have no appetite to move forward on, do you really think that with Biden in the White House, Mitch McConnell is going to suddenly have a grand epiphany? I hope Joe Biden's right. I hope they do. I hope they have a come to Jesus moment and they come around to, yeah, our people are hurting. But they don't seem to care right now, do they? They didn't seem to care over the summer when, I argue, had McConnell passed the stimulus, had McConnell passed something so Donald Trump could put his name on it, Trump probably would have won. And he didn't even do that. Every day I'm hit with on Facebook and on social media. Hey, donate to this food bank. Donate to this charity. People putting GoFundMe pages out so they can pay for their health care costs because they've lost their health insurance because their job went away. And we're in this moment where we can do great things. We can demand better. I go back to the old FDR scenario, where he said to the person talking to him that wanted him to do something, well, if you want me to do it, get out in the streets and make me do it. Organize around the idea that they're going to do what we want them to do. It's weird. There was actually a study done not too long ago that things that poll really popular never seem to get passed, but things that poll really crumbly, but big money people want, they seem to pass pretty frequently. You think the tax bill, the one major legislative win that Donald Trump had, was wildly unpopular because we've been bitten by that snake way too many times. And it hasn't got us the results that we were told it was coming. There were no rivers of gold and honey. There was no manna from heaven. There was some yellow stuff, but it wasn't honey or manna. And we ended up getting soaked, but I don't think we liked it. Because what we now have is we have, again, a scenario where the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. The working people work longer and harder for less and less, but still, they're on that treadmill, just trying to keep up, just trying not to fall behind. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? It's one thing to sit and complain about it. Oh, that's all this horrible stuff's going on. What are we going to do about it? Are we willing to organize and take to the streets to demand Joe Biden, the Democrats, and the Republicans move forward on a stimulus plan that's going to help shore up the bottom, make sure that every worker that loses a job gets access to health care, to something to put food on the table, and make sure they don't get thrown out of their homes? Are we going to make sure that the next generation doesn't get saddled with massive student loan debt and do something about the people who are being saddled with it? Are we going to do the things that overwhelming majorities of we the people want? Or are we going to continue down the same path? Because understand, Mitch McConnell is going to come out the day after or a couple of days after Joe Biden is sworn in as president and say, hey, we'd love to do all these wonderful things. We're just broke. We don't have the money. We have to tighten the belt. Get ready for the austerity talk again. The dreaded A word is back. Well, during the Trump years, they didn't pull that out of the bag. Because when it's handing money to big business and the very wealthy, the sky's the limit. But when you and I are struggling, well, you should have planned better. You should tighten the belt. You should sacrifice. And sadly, for too long, we've bought that. We've bought the arguments that the corporate titans have thrown to us and that they've used for generations. None of this stuff is new. What's new would be for us to stand up and say no more. So my call is to the folks in Georgia, by all means, vote for Warnock and Ossoff. But for the rest of us, it's time to get and stay involved. Time to go home is not now. The time to demand is now. Quick break.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day the British House of Lords rejected the People's Budget. The proposed budget plan was a product of the Liberal government headed by Prime Minister H.H. Asquith. This budget was championed by the Chancellor of Exchequer, David Lloyd George, and the President of the Board of Trade, a young Winston Churchill. The goal of the budget was to shift more of the tax burden to the wealthy. Lloyd George introduced the budget to Parliament. He praised the budget, declaring, "This is a war budget. It is for raising money to wage implacable warfare against poverty and squalidness." The budget included tax increases for higher incomes to fund welfare reforms. The budget also called for a rise in the inheritance tax. These increases were relatively modest. The most controversial aspect of the people's budget was a hike on taxes on land sales. This would have had an impact on large landowners. Since many conservatives were large landowners, they opposed the budget. The House of Lords was allowed to reject the budget, but could not amend a money bill. They had not rejected a budget for more than 2 centuries. King Edward VII privately urged that the budget be passed to avoid a crisis. The public clamored for the passage of the budget plan, but the House of Lords vetoed it. The House of Lords eventually capitulated and passed the budget the following April. Resistance to a progressive income tax structure and raising the tax rates on the wealthy is not unique to the British Parliament. Similar tax proposals have been offered in the United States and have been met with stiff opposition from conservatives in our Congress. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Many years ago, literary critic Dorothy Parker skewered an unfortunate author with her sharp wit. "This is not a novel to be tossed aside lightly," she said. "It should be thrown with great force." That's how a lot of us feel about this presidential election year, distinguished by an incumbent who is so self-centered, incompetent, and both mentally and morally unsteady that he's more dangerous than a baby who's gotten hold of a hammer. He's been demolishing truth, shattering law, smashing rights, trashing the common good, and, well, generally eradicating the egalitarian principles that unify Americans into a functioning democracy. The worst, most divisive election ever, right? No, that honor belongs to the 1860 contest that Lincoln won, despite rabid racism, furious intimidation of voters, vicious personal attacks, and daily death threats, not only from the goofball Proud Boys of the day, but from public officials and establishment newspapers. If Lincoln is elected, a Virginia member of Congress told the New York Herald, "We will go to Washington and assassinate him before his inauguration." 10 southern states wouldn't even put his name on the ballot. Yet Lincoln stayed both calm and firm in a time of dangerous turmoil, and not only did he hold a bitterly divided nation together, but he expanded our democratic ideals and advanced the power of ordinary people to achieve them. He didn't just shout, "Make America great again." He did it. Indeed, he died for it. This is Jim Hightower saying, "The point is that Lincoln did not preserve the noble idea of America by rewriting law, but by altering the culture, pushing the people themselves to act on their better natures." So, 160 years after that toxic election, here's another one, and there's no Lincoln in sight. That means we the people have to do the healing ourselves, based on our shared values of fairness, justice, and opportunity for all.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're in a moment where unemployment benefits are about to expire, I guess, the end of the month, right? The end of December. And any talk of a new stimulus plan completely dead. A number of people are saying, hey, let's just wait until Joe Biden becomes president. We'll get something done there. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a fantasy, because I don't know that Mitch McConnell is any more interested in helping poor people in a month than he is right now. And also, you've got the GOP tantrum tour. That's been the focus. And what I find really, really just incredibly interesting, if you look at the tweets from Donald Trump over the last several days, 42 tweets on election lies, 3 on the coronavirus, nothing on a stimulus. So I think that speaks volumes. And here to share some thoughts on what we should be doing, and maybe what Joe Biden will do once he's inaugurated on January 20th, 2021. I've asked Michael Linden to come talk with us. Michael's the executive director of the Groundwork Collaborative, their website, groundworkcollaborative.org. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, as always.
So am I right in assuming that there's probably going to be nothing before Christmas, and that if you're struggling today, Christmas is going to be a struggle for you?
I wish I could offer some optimism here, because what you said is exactly right. We need another package. We need more aid to people and communities. I don't have a lot of hope, unfortunately. I think Senator McConnell does not seem to want to help the economy or regular people, because he thinks it'll be helpful to Joe Biden politically. I mean, I know that sounds cynical, but that is a thing that we've learned about Senator McConnell over the last 10 years, is the guy knows how to wield power to his own benefit. If that means hurting people in the process, he'll hurt people in the process. Yeah. So I wish he could be pressured. I wish he would see the light. I wish somebody would say to him, if you show that you can actually work with Biden to make the economy better, maybe there'll be some real benefit. But I don't know that that's going to happen, unfortunately.
Do you think Joe Biden, because Joe Biden has said he thinks the Republicans are going to see the light, there'll be an epiphany. I don't know, some ray from heaven, like in the Blues Brothers movie when they saw God. Do you think that's possible?
Never say never. It's not my instinct. I feel pretty frustrated and realistic, I might say, about the willingness of Republicans to work with him. I think, I think that the Republicans, starting really under President Obama, realized that bipartisanship as a political matter would benefit the occupant of the White House. In that case, President Obama. In this case, it'll be Joe Biden, and they don't want to give him that kind of political victory. That's not the way the Democrats typically think of things, which is why you've got something like the CARES Act last spring, which had the $1,200 stimulus checks, it had the boosted UI, it had aid to small businesses. Those were all popular and effective things. There was a bunch of stuff in there that wasn't so great either, but there were some things in there that were good. That's the kind of thing that I'm not sure Republicans will do under a Biden presidency, but maybe.
We'll see. I know you're right. And to highlight your point, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats were willing to give Trump anything he wanted. I mean, the numbers that they were willing to throw out to spend to prop up the economy, to make him look good in November, were mind blowing. And I couldn't believe that, one, Trump wasn't jumping all over it.
Right.
And I think even he realized when he said, it's all off the table, and then he came back.
That's right.
Even he realized that, hey, there's a moment for me to look really good, and they're going to give it to me. It was McConnell who stood in the way.
Yeah, McConnell never wanted a deal. And look, there were some real sort of traditional hardliners even within the White House who believe, I think genuinely, they're wrong, but they believe that government spending, public investment, investing in people, making sure that the unemployed, people who lost their jobs temporarily can pay the bills. They genuinely think that that's bad for the economy. I mean, it's a little bit bonkers, and it sounds like I'm being uncharitable, but that is actually what they believe. And unfortunately, I think a lot of them had the ear of the president. And so, yes, I think Trump was kind of two minds. On the one hand, he wanted the political boost. On the other, he was listening to these people who were telling him generous unemployment benefits are what's causing joblessness. I know, again, it sounds ridiculous, but that is literally what people were saying over the summer. So I agree with you. I think that if he'd passed a second stimulus package in the fall, genuinely, he might have been reelected.
I say unquestioningly, had they come out with 2 weeks or 3 weeks before, and you'd have gotten your check 2 weeks beforehand, I don't see any way Biden wins. Because it was that close in so many places that I think that would have put him over the top. But to highlight your point, we have a senator here in Pennsylvania who back in 2008, 2009 said he wanted to see the economy take a harder down. He wanted more people to lose their homes, more people to lose their jobs, more people to lose their savings, more people to struggle, because he believed, and again, to your point, his ideology is that we would have had this hard down, but then we would have recovered, and then we would have been better.
Right. I assume you're talking about Pat Toomey and not Bob Casey.
Yes.
Yeah. That's exactly right. There is this ideology that runs throughout the modern Republican Party that basically says, as long as it's good for rich people, it's good for the economy. And that's partly why you see them pointing at the stock market all the time. Hey, it doesn't matter that people are lining up around the block for food banks. It doesn't matter that we have record high unemployment, that 20 million people are on unemployment insurance. All that matters is that the richest 10% of Americans who own 80% of the stocks are doing well. And that is a real, not only is that morally bankrupt, but it's actually economically bankrupt as well, because you can see what happens if you focus only on the very top. You miss the real picture. You miss where where prosperity actually comes from. And that's everyday workers and customers and communities that are working hard. But if you don't invest in them, you're gonna kill the golden goose. Regular folks are really where all the prosperity comes from. Pat Toomey and Mitch McConnell, those folks, it's easy for them to believe that prosperity comes from rich people because that's who they talk to. That's what they want to believe.
Yeah, I got a guest pitch from the Americans for Tax Reform people, who Joe Biden has thrown out the name of Janet Yellen to be Treasury Secretary, who she would be the first female Treasury Secretary. And I'm not overly against her. I was pushing for Elizabeth Warren, but that's another argument for another day. But in their argument of why Yellen would be bad is, well, she's gonna increase taxes on the wealthy, and your 401ks are gonna take a hit, because that's how they've gotten us to say Wall Street's important, because they've got us focused on this last bit of maybe an attempt to have some retirement security that they keep crashing the economy every couple of years to steal from. But that's how they keep us hooked into this.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things to just note about that. And I know that numbers aren't always persuasive, but most Americans don't own a single share of stock, even in 401ks or IRAs. So they say your 401ks, that falls on deaf ears among 50% of Americans who don't own a single share of stock. And the richest 10% of Americans own 80% of all the stock. And so, yeah, there are a lot of middle-class Americans who have 401ks, but fundamentally what they really rely on for their retirement is Social Security. That is where their real nest egg is. That's what folks are relying on. And, those same folks that Americans for Tax Reform and Grover Norquist, they want to cut Social Security. And if you cut Social Security, but your 401, you have $1,000 or $5,000 in your 401k, you end up way worse off relying on your $5,000 401k, but you've cut your Social Security in half. That's not a good deal. So most Americans, I think, don't fall for that stuff. That's really a very inside beltway kind of argument. I think most people understand they'd much rather have a stronger, more generous Social Security system than the Dow hitting 35,000. But
see, this is why let me stop here, because I'm actually going to disagree with you. Most of the Trump supporters that I know, they're focused on their 401k. In fact, I have a neighbor who threw it at me, recently. My 401k has never been better, and they believe Social Security is a bad investment. They've been told, repeatedly that they could do. They're smarter. They're better. They could do much better than Social Security's done return-wise, and they believe that.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously there are people who are really deep into Trump land. It's pretty hard to get them out. But I do think that, we know for a fact that, 80% of Americans support Social Security and do not want to cut it. Most Americans don't really have much money invested in the stock market, even in their retirement accounts. And most Americans, even who do have money in a retirement account, you sort of pointed to this, like, they're not checking it every day. That's not what they're worried about. They're worried about putting food on their table and keeping the lights on. And unemployment benefits are way more important to them, or a stimulus check is way more important to them. A higher minimum wage is way more important to them than what happens to the stock market. And fundamentally, if the only way to get the stock market juiced is by tax cuts for the rich, that also has really negative implications for other folks, right? Then, you get government out of the way. We were told rich people would create jobs. But actually what happens is rich people just create more opportunities for themselves to take all the gains. That's what happens. And so, sure, we could cut their taxes and give them friendly regulations, but they'll just take more of the gains. Even though they're not working harder, they're not producing more, they're not creating more. That's where we landed 40 years of tax cuts and deregulation and attacking unions and corporate monopolies, and look around. Is it working?
No, it's not. And to highlight your point, from the beginning of the pandemic until now, I saw one of the groups that follows this stuff said, the very wealthy, the top 1% or whatever, they've benefited like $1 trillion.
Yeah.
At a time when people are losing their jobs, they're losing their health insurance. They're eating through their savings, whatever savings they had, at an alarming rate. And here at the end of December, the extended unemployment goes away, and then it's a cliff. And then what?
Yeah. It's an important point. People forget when the CARES Act passed in March, it had the $1,200 checks. It had the unemployment benefits. It had small business relief. And people forget that came a week after the stock market hit bottom. And so part of what was going on there was Democrats were eager to help working people and struggling families. And Republicans thought, oh my gosh, our rich benefactors are hurting too, so I'm willing to do something. And then the stock market started coming back, and all of a sudden, Republicans didn't want to do anything anymore. And so here we are 8 months later, and a lot of regular folks are still hurting. The stock market's doing fine. Democrats still want to do something to help the regular folks, and Republicans don't. And that's the danger of treating the stock market like it's the real economy. If they're doing fine, all of a sudden, we don't need to do any more help. We don't need more unemployment checks. We don't need more stimulus checks. We don't need more small business relief. It's a real problem. It has material impacts on regular people's lives.
And the thing is the CARES Act did exactly what it was supposed to do. It staved off a massive, massive recession.
That's right. That's right. It got a lot of people through, and for a period, for a time. And what we know overall is that actually Americans, on the whole, their income actually went up, even though a lot of people lost their jobs. And that was really important for people to put food on their table and keep the lights on and have a little bit of stability and security in a very uncertain time. And then little by little, all of that's been expiring. And again, I know I'm a broken record on this, but Democrats in Congress have been screaming about extending these things for months now. They passed a bill in July. They passed a bill in May, and then they passed another one in the fall. And it's very frustrating to know how much people are hurting out there, and you have Republicans in Congress saying, stock market's doing fine, so I guess everything's all right.
Yeah, but what do you say, Michael, to the people who say, like Ted Cruz today, for instance, was saying that Democrats won't pass anything, that the Republicans came forward with legislation, the Democrats said no, and Democrats are really the people who are holding this stimulus up?
I mean, it's just not true. Democrats have passed several bills out of the House. I think they would be very happy to come to the table if there was a real negotiation to be had. The Republicans did put a bill forward in the Senate, which was, in almost all respects, insufficient. No stimulus checks, for example, unemployment benefits cut in half. And it also had this incredible provision that prevents workers from suing their employers if the employers put them at illegal risk. If they harm them, their health, their lives, they can't be sued. They can't be held accountable. And not just for a year, not just for 2 years, but forever, basically.
Yep. Immunity.
And immunity. And I don't know how Republicans expect Democrats to sell working people out like that, to say, okay, yes, we do want to cut, we do need to do some aid. We do need to have some benefits to families right now. We absolutely do. And in exchange, we're going to let employers murder you. I mean, I know, again, that sounds a little hyperbolic, but that's what they're saying, is you are allowed to harm your employees with no legal recourse. That's a really tough pill to swallow.
No, I'm right. And I've been screaming about the immunity shield for a long time. The day they came out with it, going, there's no way this can pass. And good on the Democrats for having the spine to say no. And hopefully they continue that. Now, Biden came out with his economic team, which, there's some names on there that we've had here on the program over the years, some really great people, I think. Outside of, Janet Yellen, a Treasury Secretary, he's come out with someone I think Neera Tanden to be the director of OMB, somebody named Wally Ademo, director of a deputy Treasury Secretary, and then Jared Bernstein and Heather Boucher, who to be on the Council of Economic Advisors. Both folks I think right?
Yeah, I know a lot of those folks. I know Neera. I worked with Neera when I was at the Center for American Progress. I know Heather. I know Jared. The other folks I know by reputation, but don't know them personally. I think in general it's a really strong team. It's a really strong team that I think actually reflects the changing thinking in the Democratic Party on the economy over the last 10 years. I think Democratic Party kind of went through this transition in the 90s where it really tried to embrace some of the more Republican thinking ideas about, shrinking government and doing a lot more deferring to the private sector, which has its place, but maybe not to the degree that people embraced. But over the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a real shift based on just real experience and empirical evidence the importance of inequality, the importance of worker power, the importance of higher wages to overall economic growth. These are things that in the 80s and 90s were really not thought about or studied, and now they have been, and the party is starting to shift. The thinking on the left has really shifted quite a lot, and I think that if you look at the breadth of Biden's economic team, he really kind of picked a team that reflects the sort of center of where the party is thinking on the economy. It's true, they're not the most left folks out there, but they're also not kind of, DLC centrist, kind of what some people might call neoliberal thinkers.
That was going to be my next question. Is this an admission that neoliberalism is dead?
I think
that hopefully the Democratic Party moves away from, Republican light and actually starts talking about, maybe being the party of FDR again.
I think it might be too soon to declare neoliberalism dead. Unfortunately, I think we've got a ways to go, but I think that this is very much a step along the path to embracing a new progressive vision of the economy. You have, for example, just to take Heather and Jared as examples. These are two folks who have spent their entire career talking about inequality and how it is a drag on economic growth, and the importance of workers and worker power and how important that is for overall prosperity, respectively. That they are now two of the three people on the Council of Economic Advisors, and the chair that the president-elect has nominated, Cece Rouse, is also a labor economist. This is a woman who has dedicated her career to studying labor markets and understands the importance of full employment and truly tight labor markets, and why that's really important for the economy. That's really important. You're not seeing, people whose experience is in public-private partnerships, or, lowering tax rates and broadening the tax base, things that you might have heard in the past. It's a real shift.
And that's a good thing. I mean, because the people that you surround yourself with are the ones who are going to direct you in a good direction or a bad direction. And as I said, I'm happy to see Jared and Heather on that team, because I've had both of them on the show a number of times over the years, and they're very good quality people with really good ideas. And I hope Joe Biden goes in that direction. So last line of questioning I have for you, because January 20th is coming. What's the first day? What do you see him doing to help people who are truly struggling right now? What can he do?
Well, there's a lot that he can do himself, and I think one broad kind of rule of thumb is that the president-elect should really use all the power that's available to him to make people's lives better. Exactly what you said, to really help people. And that means, if that means reprogramming some funds that have been allocated, honestly, like President Trump did, but using it to the benefit of regular people, he should do it. If that means canceling some student debt, he should do it. If that means, revisiting some of the overtime regulations and labor regulations that may have, that Trump has gutted, he absolutely should do it. And he should really push the boundaries of what he can do himself, because fundamentally, I think it comes back to the beginning of our conversation. I don't know that he's going to get a lot of help from Congress. And I think he should hope for that. He should work towards that, because ultimately we do need legislation, but there is a lot that he can do right off the bat. And he should not be shy, and he should not allow what was passed to be, sort of the boundary of what he can do.
No, I'm with you. And one of the things I'd like to see him do is to reinstate the fair elections rule that helps speed up union elections, so people have the ability to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions. Absolutely. like those folks at Navistar did over these last 25 days. But Michael, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. I'm sure you'll be back often as this continues down the road and the Biden team picks up the ball and runs with it.
I'll be back as often as you invite me.
I appreciate it, Michael. Thank you so much. Our good friend Michael Linden, Executive Director of the Groundwork Collaborative. Make sure you check out their work, groundworkcollaborative.org. We'll get links out on social media on how you can do that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1930. That was the day the world lost the miner's angel, Mother Jones. She had crossed the country many times over, been involved in practically every strike that built the labor movement, stood with miners and steelworkers and mill children everywhere. Mother Jones had asked to be buried with the Verdun miners killed in the massacre of 1898 at Union Miners Cemetery in Mount Olive, Illinois. Dozens of labor leaders, including AFL President William Green, attended her funeral in Maryland, where she had been living. Then AFL representatives, several Illinois miners, and others boarded the Baltimore and Ohio train to accompany her body to Mount Olive. Historian David Featherling describes the scene as her body arrived. A band played Nearer My God to Thee as onlookers bowed their heads and wept. Survivors of the Verdun riot bore the casket to the Odd Fellows Hall, where it lay in state. The town of 3,500, with its strong and violent heritage, was thronged by thousands of coal diggers. At least 15,000 turned out for the funeral. Broadcast on WCFL, the Chicago Federation of Labor's radio station, the labor priest, Reverend John McGuire, gave the memorial address and officiated at the funeral in Mount Olive's Roman Catholic Church of the Ascension. He asked what weapons she had to fight the fight against oppression of working men. Only the great and burning conviction that oppression must end. Only an eloquent and flaming tongue that won men to her cause. Only a mother's heart torn by the suffering of the poor. Only a towering courage that made her carry on in the face of insuperable odds. Only a consuming love for the poor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a study put out by the folks at the University of Chicago to highlight what Michael Linden was saying, that the CARES Act actually did what it was supposed to do, because you had the poverty rate actually fell from April until June. We got money into people's hands. They were able to pay their bills. Some people actually did a touch better, because if you remember the argument that Lindsey Graham and a lot of Republicans were making about unemployment insurance, is what had happened is, and look, my daughter was one of the winners in this for a few very short weeks. She only made, her unemployment was like $120 a week, and she got $600 on top of that for those couple of weeks until she had to go back to work. She didn't have a choice; she had to go back to work. But for those few weeks, she got the extra $600, and for some people, especially low-wage workers, that little bit of boost helped them. They got a little bit ahead. And this really had to tick off people like Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell, because, those lazy people who work for minimum wage, they got something. And they didn't want to go back to work. And no, they didn't. They didn't, because they were doing better on unemployment. That is true. But they didn't have a choice to stay on unemployment. And this is where actually knowing how the system works allows you to know that they're lying to you. So every time, Lindsey Graham or one of them came out and said, well, they're choosing not to go to work. That's not true. That is a bold-faced lie. And they did it knowing that you don't get the choice to not go back to work. When the employer calls you back, you have two choices. You go back to work or you quit your job. And in either instance, unemployment cuts you off. It's that simple. But as the CARES Act kicked in, from April to June, the poverty rate was dropping again. Once it began to expire, once the money ran out, because they cut off the extra $600. I believe it was at the end of June. And from there, you saw the poverty rate rise from 9.4% in April all the way up to 11.4% in October, with nearly 7 million people plunging into poverty. And you go, well, what is poverty? Well, poverty for a family of 4 is about 26 grand a year. Oddly enough, it was the number 26.6 was the number that if you made above 26.6, you could be a manager, and they could work 100 hours a week, and you could get a nice title, but no overtime protections. Now the sad reality is more people have plunged even further below that, and it's because we haven't done anything to help them, and we don't have a system in place to ensure that workers are taken care of. And we don't have the organizations that have the kind of power that can push this stuff. The one organization that had power in all of this, and my friend Sarah Nelson, the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, they were able to push through for their industry because they're 80% unionized in the airline industry still to this day. They were able to push through what I've been saying should have happened to every worker, that they were made whole. They didn't lay anybody off. They got money from the government to cover the costs. They laid nobody off. They covered everyone's benefits. They still got their paycheck. They were still attached to the job all the way through to the end of September. And they did it to the end of September because everybody thought, even me, I believed there was going to be another stimulus. I cannot believe that Mitch McConnell allowed Trump to lose because they would not help working people. That's what's happened. So for all of my Trumpkin friends who want to be angry at, there's this mystery, thing out there, and there's this, there's Joe Biden learned coding and someone stole the USB. I didn't get close enough to see that ballot. Mitch McConnell cost Trump the election. Unquestioningly, in my mind. In this state, do you think out of, 7 million votes? Do you think 68,000 people who would have gotten a stimulus check would have changed their mind and go, well, you know what? I got this check from Donald Trump. His name is in giant letters right there. 3/4 of the check says Donald Trump on it. Do you think they would have voted for him? You bet your sweet bippy they would have. And that would have happened in Georgia and in Arizona and Nevada, and it would have been ugly. But Mitch McConnell, so for all you Trumpkins who want to be angry at somebody, be angry at Mitch McConnell because they could have passed anything. The Democrats were willing to give them anything they wanted, with the exception of immunity for employers to kill off their workers. That was a bridge too far. But any amount they wanted. Democrats passed a $3.4 trillion package to aid working people, and Donald Trump could have put his name all over it in giant Sharpie letters. Could have probably even drawn pictures if he wanted. And Mitch McConnell held that up. Mitch McConnell said no. So for all my Trump supporters, if you really want to be angry at somebody, if you really want to be angry, it's Mitch McConnell. That simple. But I hope Michael's right. I hope that when Joe Biden takes office, he does use the tools of the office to help move us forward. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney will be here to share some thoughts. Right back.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We'll begin to get that fleet of petrol and diesel cars off the road, beginning what Boris Johnson would call an electric revolution here in Britain.
UK accelerates phase-out of gasoline cars to 2030. U.S. car makers knew 50 years ago that burning fossil fuels causes global warming and lied about it. Trump Interior Department allows states to veto federal conservation projects. Plus, San Francisco changes building codes to phase out polluting natural gas.
All of those phase outs and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We have the technology to do it. They certainly have the technology to do it in the United States of America, and you can do it whilst delivering hundreds of thousands of new green jobs at the same time.
Thanks, Boris. Man, do I wish the U.S. had a conservative party that wasn't insane. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I think you're kicking us off today with some very good news. Climate change, apparently, is over.
No, sadly, not at all.
What?
However, October 2020 was only the fourth warmest October ever recorded.
See, it was the fourth warmest. It is getting cooler. Everything is fine.
That's according to both NOAA and NASA, based on record keeping that began in the 1880s. But never fear, 2020 is still on track to clock in as one of the top 2 hottest years ever recorded, which is remarkable because there is a cooling La Nina weather pattern in the Pacific Ocean, and that has not slowed down 2020 at all.
Most of the years where we've had record heat, it's because we've had El Niños at the same time.
Right.
Now we have a La Nina cooling things down.
And it's not helping.
Oh.
In Washington, outgoing Trump Interior Secretary David Bernhardt has released a special secretarial order altering how the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund is administered. Permanent funding for the program was finally passed by a bipartisan Congress and touted by Trump on the campaign trail to boost his environmental credentials. But Bernhardt's new order now restricts the funding that's available for conservation projects and effectively allows states to veto public land purchases, which critics say undermines the very purpose of the fund.
So he did it just for the election, and now they're undoing it?
Yeah.
How unlike them.
However, the New York Times reports that President-elect Joe Biden's transition team includes dozens of climate change policy experts who are already drafting executive orders requiring that every federal agency, department, and program prepare to address climate change, and that they are gearing up to legally dismember Trump's rollbacks of climate and pollution regulations.
All I heard was dismembering and Trump.
In other news, U.S. automakers GM and Ford knew 50 years ago that car emissions cause dangerous man-made climate change. That's according to internal company documents obtained by E&E News. But instead of shifting their business models away from fossil fuels, the two car giants spent decades and millions of dollars lobbying to undermine efforts to reduce emissions, funding climate science denier front groups, blocking efforts in Congress to improve fuel efficiency and make vehicles cleaner, and they even doubled down on gas-guzzling trucks and SUVs. The revelations mirror similar investigations showing how ExxonMobil executives also knew decades ago that their product causes global warming and also lied to the public and blocked action.
So they've been lying to us for 50 years, and now that we know the truth, we got an entire Republican Party that is lying to us about them lying to us.
But Britain has had quite enough of that. This week, Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced the UK will move up its planned phase-out of internal combustion engine vehicles. Instead of the previous target of 2035, the UK will ban the sale of new gas and diesel cars starting in 2030.
Wow.
That is an ambitious timetable, according to Stephen Norman, managing director of Britain's Vauxhall Motors, in an interview with the BBC.
So, yes, it's a little bit tighter than we were expecting, but the plans are in place, obviously, to meet that, and meet it we're going to have to.
You mean they're just trying to meet it because they have to, because the government said so? They're not whining and complaining and filing lawsuits and trying to throw Boris Johnson out of his job?
Exactly.
I am so moving to the UK.
It's part of what Prime Minister Johnson is calling his green revolution, to revive Britain's economy and create jobs through innovation to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Finally, San Francisco is going all electric. This week, the city's Board of Supervisors voted to update building codes to eliminate fossil fuels in all new residential and commercial buildings beginning next June. New homes and businesses will run on all electric appliances, significantly reducing the city's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, reducing indoor air pollution, and removing the danger of natural gas explosions.
Nice. Let the lawsuits begin. I'm still moving to the UK for their green revolution. For much more on all of these reports and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Felicity Huffman back in the news. She's been out of jail about a little over a year now, right? You remember her? She spent 11 days in prison over the paying off colleges and recruiters to get their kids into college. Colleges that they probably wouldn't have gotten into other than having a boatload of money to pay someone off. Yeah, she did 11 days in prison. She is out a little over a year, not new gig. She is going to be the star of a half-hour ABC comedy based on the life of Susan Savage, who was the owner of a AAA baseball team, the Sacramento River Cats. She's going to be what they say the unlikely owner of a minor league baseball team that she inherits after her husband's death. And what could be funnier than someone dying? Can't wait to see that. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Our good friend Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, a new comedy coming out. This is the reason I led with this is what next year could look like.
What, 11 days in prison?
No, I didn't mention Donald Trump once.
Oh. Well, actually, I thought about that today with Joe Biden reversing when he gets in executive orders.
Yeah.
I have a little prediction.
Well, let's hear. I
I'll
can't
tell you
wait.
what I think. And I was saying this today because a friend of mine was calling me today, and she was talking about this and that and executive orders and the new civil service thing that Trump did. And I told her, I will bet you that you do not hear a constant. You'll hear it once in a while because of the press, but you will not hear a constant. I undid this executive Trump order today. You won't hear it. He will do things, and in general, some things will. The press will pull forth. Trump had the executive order. I don't think that Joe Biden will sit there and do what Trump did for 4 years, which is Obama did this, Obama did that. I just don't think. I think, for the most part, Biden will try to let the name just be down low.
Yeah, no,
I
I completely agree. I see him just going, we're going to do this. Executive order after executive order. Right. No tweets, no fanfare, no big signing ceremonies where we bring in people for photo ops. I don't see it.
I don't either.
I agree with you. And I saw this, I was looking on the Twitters and I saw this screen grab from a Fox News program earlier where they had shown Twitter activity between a certain period of time. I think it was November 2nd and November 16th, where Joe Biden didn't tweet out anything. And Donald Trump tweeted out 100 things. And I guess their argument was, Donald Trump's, more engaged and more vigorous. And I'm going, well, 100 lies as opposed to saying nothing. I'll take the saying nothing.
Well, and also Trump, as you know and I know, and I must say successfully, although it was his demise in certain points, but successfully used Twitter to basically, for the first time, I think, in modern history, bypass the media.
Yep.
Basically. He used it. And then the media, even the ones that didn't like him, would grab onto it because they would, he tweeted this today. He did that. And that's why he did it. And he used that totally to be his, press statement.
No, you give credit where credit is due. He was able to manipulate the system to his advantage, and he did.
Sure.
No, unquestioningly. But it comes back to this moment where I'm looking at what happens the day after he's no longer president. Does Twitter drop him from the platform?
Well, I believe he's going to have Trump TV. I think that's going to happen. Some version of it where he will, have some people gathered together, maybe several thousand, and he'll have an issue which he'll promote forth. I mean, he's either going to do the Trump TV route, or frankly, he will just focus on business. But I think he'll do the Trump TV route. That's what I really think will happen with the $5.99 per subscriber, which will bring in about 17 million. And then I do predict he'll have a Mideast bureau, which, let's say the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will pay big money to have broadcast in Saudi Arabia.
No, it's interesting you bring up Saudi Arabia, because I had a conversation with a Trump supporter who said, not all of us are racist. And I said, no, I don't believe all Trump supporters are racist.
Right.
I do believe all racists are Trump supporters. That's I'll go there. But I don't believe you're all racist, and I believe you think you have valid reasons. And one of the reasons that he threw out at me is that the fact that we're working with Saudi Arabia now, and in his view, we had never worked with Saudi Arabia before, and that we're containing terrorism by stopping the spread of Wahhabi Islamic fundamentalism. He seemed to believe that Trump had single-handedly done all this. And you're someone that I respect and respect your opinion on this. Is this something he should get credit for?
Well, I don't believe so, because that's not what's happened. I mean, on the surface, that they may say that. Having lived in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which I did in 1983, totally familiar with it, 11 years in Congress of dealing with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and frankly, watching everybody kowtow to Saudi Arabia over the years. And now we took it to a new level, because at one point in time, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, which I like to call him Mr. Bonesaw, would have been very, very vulnerable if not for Donald Trump. There was a point in time with the Khashoggi murder that the only thread that held MBS together was Donald Trump. And with Saudi Arabia, you don't get a thanks for that. You don't get them to curtail things. Look, Rick, they've done this faux freedom. Oh, a woman can drive. Wow, they've really changed the world over there. It's the same kingdom, the same aggressiveness, the same forcefulness, and they also helped to create, as we know, terrorism. No question about it in the Mideast. So I don't think they've done anything except a great front. When MBS came to the United States and the media said, "Oh, look at the great reformer." This is a guy that arrested his own mother and put her under house arrest to put her by the wayside so he could become king.
Wow.
So I don't think that anybody should be grateful for anything we have done for Saudi Arabia. They only understand money and only understand trying to manipulate us.
Yeah, but we haven't heard the Wahhabism. We haven't heard that in a while. So this guy was like, "Well, we haven't had any terrorist attacks. There've been no terrorist attacks, and it's because of this." And he also pointed out that he believed that we've achieved Middle East peace, I guess, between Israel and the Arab nations, because they had, I guess he said, two major peace deals with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain that recognized Israel's right to exist. And he said, that's the reason. That's another reason he supports him. And I'm going, I don't remember it that way. Am I missing something?
Well, no. First of all, 19 Saudis flew on planes into our buildings, and we attacked Iraq. Okay? We took the Osama bin Laden family and flew them out of here without questioning. If somebody had done something so atrocious in America, they wouldn't let their family. They want to question their families. Not in this case. Within hours, they flew the families out without questioning them of what they would know. I mean, there's a whole history here. The 911 report. I mean, we can go on and on and on. The Saudis denied everything. Look, they are not doing Wahhabi terrorism. They promote others and fund groups that they help create ISIS. So I just don't think there's a great big Mideast peace applaud here either. Look, right. The United Arab Emirates and Bahrain came together and they did a deal with Israel. I understand that. Saudi Arabia is going to do the same thing. They had a secret meeting with Netanyahu in the last month. But that doesn't mean that's a peace accord for the Palestinians. That's a business accord plus F-37 sold to the United Arab Emirates. I mean, this was more of a business deal. Is it better than not, happening? Sure. Any type of beginning of communication with Israel and the Arabs, but it simply is not a Palestinian Palestinian-Israeli peace accord by any stretch of the imagination.
Now, and talking about the Saudis, though, I mean, you got someone like Jared Kushner who's heavily invested there. I mean, they're making money off it, so of course they're going to be nice to Saudi Arabia because there's tons of economic ties. In fact, I understand, Jared's heading back to the kingdom in the days ahead.
Well, yes, and this is a great story, which, Rick, I've seen an article as of speaking to you right now, nobody related the reality of it. They just put the story about Kushner traveling to Saudi Arabia, and he's going to try to have Qatar make a last-ditch effort to, make nice with Saudi Arabia, et cetera, because there's been this big rift between the country of Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Well, it's very interesting that Kushner did that because nobody from the media is asking him to talk about April of 2017 when Jared Kushner made a direct pitch to the Minister of Finance of Qatar in April of 2017 to try to get money for distressed assets in a company called the Kushner Companies for his father and he, and it was for their signature property, 666 Fifth Avenue, right? Well, the Qataris said no. And then guess what happened 1 month later, all right? 1 month later, Jared Kushner put up the deal that led to the blockage of Qatar by Saudi Arabia. So he's over there trying to undo the deal he did to block them. Now think about that for a second. And why is he doing that? Because, business.
It all comes back to the money, doesn't it?
Sure. It's always been that way. And that's why I mentioned Trump Television, which, maybe the Saudis need to have a Mideast bureau for, say, $50 million a year, to have that bureau out there to report news.
So we should plan on this, and I'm actually gonna write this down because now the wheels are spinning. You think of all the attacks that they made against the Clinton Foundation, and now you're going to turn this into a media organization. Wow, the grift you can get out of that.
Well, yes, and then also, it'll be a pain in the side, not for the Democratic side, but it will be for the Republican side because, say, Senator so-and-so doesn't do what Trump wants done on a certain piece of legislation, so Trump flies to that state. Say Rubio, for example, doesn't do what he wants. He flies to that state, has a rally of 5,000, 6,000 people, which he could do, maybe 9,000. And then all of a sudden it's on Trump TV. Here's the issue. You got to go after Rubio. He can put a lot of heat on people, quite a lot, and also influence quite a lot of votes. There's a lot of potential here. I'm talking on the business end.
No. Look, every con that's going to be possible, I'm sure they will unearth. And to me, this whole push against the election is the next con, because I truly believe that they know they lost, and there's no way they're going to overturn this. That they're just fundraising and list building off of this, so that they can seriously cash in on the other side. Like you said, $5.99 a month.
Right, and there was a broadcast. I think it was yesterday, and one of the news reporters on her show, and I can't remember which reporter she was. She threw out a date of Mr. President, December the 18th, and he said, well, it could be the 14th or the 18th of when this comes to some type of head. Well, it's not the 18th. She made a mistake, and he said the 18th. He didn't realize it's December 14th with the electors is when this all comes to an end. He knows that. He thought there was another date, but he himself, wasn't just confused on this. He knows it's done.
Yeah, he knows.
But he's, playing it to the end.
No. And look, I like what the Secretary of State of Georgia said. It's basically all mirrors and games. They're putting out misinformation. They're basically lying, to feed the fascination of these people who are, who want to believe.
But yet, at the other hand, he's like, okay, GSA kicks in, General Services Agency for Biden. Biden's getting the intel brief starting today. So he's doing that end of it. So nobody can say, well, they're going to have the military drag him out of there. So he's doing part of that, but yet he's keeping up the front that, we have a chance on this thing. Rudy Giuliani had a hearing, I think it was in some kind of created hearing
in Pennsylvania.
Arizona. Or he had Pennsylvania. He had one in Arizona too.
Yeah.
I don't think it even got much attention, but I did watch the clips today, and it was like nothing was presented. They had a guy that said, "Yeah, I saw something with data there."
Yeah.
And
No, today was Arizona. You're right. Wednesday before Thanksgiving was here in Pennsylvania.
Oh yes, Pennsylvania.
And the guy who led the meeting, the guy who led the mock hearing because it wasn't under oath, Senator Mastriano, who's probably going to run for governor in 2022, actually tested positive for COVID right after that big fake hearing. So they had a nice super spreader event.
They didn't have masks in Arizona either.
No. Again, stupid is by party line, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy stuff.
Right.
And finally, I guess the last place I've been thinking of. Where'd I go? The people Biden's been rolling out. Have you been paying attention to the transition? Because evidently we're allowed to go forward. The transition is happening. Tomorrow, I guess they're going to get their first presidential daily briefings. So we're kind of moving, right?
Well, yes, they are. And what Biden is doing, which I think is going to be pretty secure, frankly, he's putting in people that have been around him. He's putting in people that have been some in the Clinton administration, some in the Obama administration, with his White House economic team he rolled out. He has Cecilia Rouse and Brian Deese as part of the economic team. Neera Tanden is with the progressive group, and she's going to head the Office of Budget Management. So he's putting people together. Now, his first economic advisor is vice president. Also, I think it's Jared Bernstein.
Bernstein from EPI.
Is coming out into the group. So he's putting his pieces together. I think pretty appropriately, and he's brought some people in that know him, people that know how to make the machinery roll. Now, there's going to be some debate of Congressman Clyburn talked about some more black cabinet members. Some of the progressives want more, progressive cabinet members. That's fine, but he's put an internal team together, and that's what you need to do because that internal team then works with people to put the cabinet together.
Yeah, I expect a smooth transition. I expect the wheels to run a little rounder and a little bit better on January 20th than they are on the 19th.
Yeah, you just got to be a little bit more careful with the dog, but that's okay.
Did he kick the dog?
I said Fox News, the headline will be, "Did Biden kick the dog?"
I had a friend that said, he kicked Trump's behind. That's how he broke his foot.
He's going to get a cat, too, by the way.
Oh, see, now,
you know that.
Why would you want a mangy cat?
Well, I'm a dog person.
Me too.
But the cat's all right. He's going to appeal to the cat people, too.
All right. I guess. So long as it doesn't pee on the rug.
There you go.
But, Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney, former congressman and one of my favorite political analysts. For me, one of the smartest guys in politics. Let's finish up with one of my favorite stories of the day. Evidently, Morristown, New Jersey. Been through there a number of times. Not a place I want to go very often. Evidently, the Policemen's Benevolent Association of New Jersey is suing the local police department. Their claims that police officers have been forced to meet ticket quotas. Yes, we love the ticket quota argument, but Morristown, New Jersey, they're saying that's what's going on. And the PBA has alleged that the illegal ticket quota system was enforced and that they are fighting back. So, hey, maybe this is the police saying we're on your side. Don't defund us, of which I am dead set against defunding the police. I'm in favor of doing some smarter things, but defunding is just kind of stupid in my view. Just what it is. But we got lots to get to this week. The transition happening. There's lots going on with the election in Georgia. So much to get to, and so much fun and entertainment. I'm still waiting for Donald Trump to come out of his hole. He had no events today and none planned for tomorrow. We'll see where that takes us. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. Stay out of Morristown, New Jersey. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com.